Hey now.
Mr. Flemons.
Hey, how's it going, Nicholas?
Good, how you doing, sir?
Oh, it's going well, man. How you been doing? It's what a great way to get the week started. At least it's midweek. It just felt like it began.
I know. We're just doing something that you just did. We're getting ready to move here, so it's been kind of chaotic, but
Oh yeah, where are you going to?
we're heading to Rising Fawn, Georgia. It's about 30 or 40 minutes south of Chattanooga.
Okay.
Um, Norman Blake actually lives there. He's kind of
Oh,
one of
nice.
the more famous musicians that lives down there, but it's a beautiful just countryside area. We're kind of a little bit tired of city life, and it's just a bit more peaceful down there. So I think we're ready to need some space. Plus, our boy is probably going to start walking soon and needs more space to run around. And fire truck comes by our house like 5 times a day and always on a nap schedule. So we're trying to
Mhm.
change that up.
Yes.
How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good. Everything's been good since I moved everybody up here to Illinois, and yeah, Naperville's been nice to us. And yeah, my wife has our daughter out. They're about to go visit her brother who lives just around the corner.
Beautiful. Does her whole family live in Chicago?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah, everybody's either between Highland Park and the city, and then Plainfield. Mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah,
beautiful.
that's been really good.
And how do you pronounce your wife's name? Vania or
Oh,
Vania?
Vania.
Vania. She is
Uh-huh.
such a lovely person to talk to.
Oh yeah, she's been pretty amazing. Leadbelly brought us together. I was just reminded of this. But
That's a story to tell.
yeah, I was well, I was just talking with Bob Centelli and for Oregon State University, and so I did a program with him on Leadbelly. It was celebrating the 125th anniversary of Leadbelly,
Mhm.
and after the show, as Robert Plant invited everybody out to drinks, and so I met Vania there. We traded numbers, and then went on our first date several months, or I guess a couple of weeks down the road from there. So it was kind of a really nice meeting.
How long ago was that?
That was 2015, April 26, 2015 was when the event happened.
Wow,
Hmm. Yeah.
it's incredible. He's actually in my next episode. So the episode this will come out after the 8th episode of the show, which is a Black History Month featured, and then Lead Belly is in the 9th episode. Um, and then the 10th is the one that finishes the first season. So I'll take a little break after that, but really, really looking forward to digging more into his story. I know a good portion of it, but there's always some really interesting stuff I dig up when I start going through these artists and talking about their stories.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Well, that's
So
awesome. If I well, geez, I got a lot of stuff that I've picked up over the years from of Lead Belly stuff. Yeah, have a great time. Right. It's a great rich story. Do you have a John Zwed's book, The Man Who Recorded the World, on Alan Lomax?
I have it in my notes to look it up online if possible, because I don't think I'll get it in time to finish the story. But I might be able to. See, I can probably find it on Amazon or something like that and get it over here quick.
Yeah, and then there's a Smithsonian movie on Leadbelly that has a great bit at the end where it talks about how Leadbelly tried to become a singing cowboy later in his life.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. I'll definitely look
yeah,
that up.
yeah, it's
Uh,
pretty amazing story.
so are you recording on your end?
Yes, I am. Am I supposed to be recording at the same time?
I mean, if it's up to you. I can definitely record through here. If you it In my experience, if you can record on your end for at least the musical parts, for you to play a couple songs,
Mm-hmm.
that would be beneficial because it doesn't come through great through the Zoom chat.
Oh,
Um,
okay. 'Cause I have my snowball microphone ready. So when
okay,
I do play, I got a microphone going, but I haven't ever recorded anything on this yet.
okay.
Um, Let me see. I'm not sure what I would do to get to it. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, well, we may have to just record it on your side for now, and I'll just let me see how it's coming through.
That sounds lovely. Actually, I think that'll do just fine.
Great, great. Well, we'll just record it on your side, and I got this little microphone that works out really nicely.
Okay, perfect.
All right, yeah. There we go. And I just got a guitar here. Let me see. Well, I guess since I got it, let me get the little. I can get the little, maybe some gourd banjo.
Yeah.
I'm actually gonna hold off on that gourd banjo for just a minute. Nah, I'm gonna pull that out. See where the conversation goes.
Sure.
All right.
Always nice to start off in tune. Always nice to start off in tune. That sounds good. Beautiful.
Let's see. There we go. There. Awesome.
All right. You want to get going?
Absolutely. Yeah, let's go ahead and get to it, because it seems like we got a lot to talk about.
We do. I want to cover as much as we can, if that's fine with you, and might as well get underway. Let me just move some things around so this is a bit more organized. And I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
Absolutely. How's this light over here? Because
if it's possible, you can turn it off right now. It looks good, but there's definitely a glow.
Yeah. Let's see here. There we go.
Yeah, that's great. Now I can see the whole record collection.
Yeah, man. Yeah, this has a couple of nice ones in here.
I imagine you got yourself quite a lot of gems in there.
Yeah, like this one here. Jug band.
They're actually in my next episode. I'm doing. They're the start off for my Black History Month.
And I got Charlie Patton.
Charlie Patton.
Yeah.
Man, you got That would essentially make my life to have something that kind of collection. And I'm hoping to acquire that at some point.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you gotta get to the place first, and once you get that place, I key in a little bit of time,
Yeah, of course. I feel like I'm on the path. We'll find it. How's it sound on my end first?
Sounding good. How am I doing on mine?
Perfect.
Great.
All right. Let's get going. You're listening to American Songcatcher. This is Nicholas Edward Williams. I'm here today with a very special guest, Mr. Dom Flemons. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me today, Dom.
Well, thank you so much, Nicholas. It's a pleasure to talk with you.
So what was your childhood like? Does music run in your family?
Well, not in the way that I play music necessarily, but my parents were very active listeners. They had a lot of records and a lot of cassettes and CDs around the house of the types of music they got into. Like my dad was always a big fan of country and western, but he also was a big fan of like Parliament Funkadelic and James Brown, and my mom the same. But my mom also had a great interest in a lot of pop show tunes and everything like that. So when I started to bring folk music around, they were shaking their heads, wondering what I was doing at first. So it was sort of an interesting departure away from what everybody was listening to in my area at the time.
Yeah, sounds like an eclectic childhood then.
Oh, definitely, always. And when I happened to catch a documentary on the history of rock and roll on TV, it got me really deep into researching out the folk music revival, which again was sort of an interesting sort of combination of rock music as well as folk music, especially in an age that was far past the 1960s or 70s. There was just a lot more, a lot of this music had already converged into one thing. So I was always searching for some of the old sounds that preceded the more well-known artists,
And that was more when you were later in life, when you were an adult, or was that still kind of in your early days? Early days.
That's, I guess that'd be between 16 all the way to about 23 when I started to come out to North Carolina, and I began the Carolina Chocolate Drops. I guess from those ages, that's when I started researching. Because first I would just pick out a single song from the radio, for example. I don't know, let's say like a song like Brown Eyed Girl from Van Morrison. I then started to listen to every Van Morrison record that had come out up to that point, sometimes chronologically, or sometimes I had to find these records in used record stores. And in an age before computers, that took a lot of time, but it was a great search, and I was always listening for a new sound. And so when it came to folk music, I got really deep into the Vanguard Records Newport Folk Festival collection, and that really gave me sort of a template to work with. Then later I found the Anthology of American Folk Music and a couple of other different compilations. And by the time I finished college, I kind of jet set off to North Carolina to see what new music I could find. And that was where I found a bunch of adventures. And now I found 15 years later, I'm still finding new adventures every day.
Where do you think that curiosity came from?
Well, I've always enjoyed the idea of traveling and being on the move. And then I've also been a big fan of stories, people's histories, people's cultures, why their cultures are the way they are, and why they are, how they currently sit in the time and space, and then where are they going? And for me, I was always interested in sort of the oldest stories that I could find. Or, and even as a child, I was always looking for the oldest histories, the oldest mythologies, the oldest stories. And this has been a theme my whole life, collecting those stories, at least in my mind, some for the enjoyment, some for, I guess, artistic merit, some for cultural merit, but nevertheless, always listening for those sounds. And I think that just overtook me, especially once I went to North Carolina and I was able to apply a lot of the sounds I heard on record to the music I was making when I was out on the road.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, North Carolina seems to be the breeding ground for so much of the music that came through immigrants through the Appalachian Mountains, and then kind of filtered its way through, around Asheville, that sort of area. And I constantly keep drawing back to the Harry Smith mythology, and it seems to be the holy grail for so many different generations, and waves keep coming of people that find it. And then, there's new inspiration of new different, people reviving old sounds and then kind of experimenting on those old sounds. I feel like we're like maybe on the tail end of one of those right now, or it could be in the middle of it, who knows? But I feel like that started maybe back with "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou," or, in the early 2000s, and kind of essentially started a new wave, although it'd be a long wave of 20 years, but nevertheless, it's happening.
Well, funny enough, I was just talking with some folks about it. It's gearing up for its, I believe it's 25th anniversary since that the film had come out. And yeah, it was a film that even when I was in my local scene, we were playing a certain series of songs, and then after a while, there were new people that started coming in, bringing in the "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou" songs.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting to see even how culture can change within a short period of time. I remember when Old Crow Medicine Show's first major label album came out, and I remember that was a very powerful album to listen to. I also think about even when it came to stuff that eventually would make a difference in my own career. I think about the album "Don't Give Up on Me" by Solomon Burke as being a real rootsy acoustic take on soul music, and of course that was the reason I worked with Joe Henry for Genuine Negro Jig, and it was just one of those. It's just been an era where the experimentation of acoustic sounds and sort of bigger production have kind of gone to a whole new, I guess, level, and so it's been interesting to kind of wade my way through.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm sure it's got to have such an impact being a part of it. I can't only imagine, because I'm more of a bystander watching it, and I've been inspired by it. When I saw that movie, that I heard some songs that I'd heard from my childhood, even though I wasn't, necessarily cultured as a child as far as music goes. I did hear Big Rock Candy Mountains on, somewhere. And hearing that the revival of those songs in that movie, and obviously the way that the Coen brothers projected it and put it into the public eye was so, you couldn't help but be immersed in it somehow, you know? And I feel like you can't watch that movie and not love some of that music, which is such an interesting thing. And for me, I didn't have any experience with that kind of music before that. And then, you know, it took 5 years after seeing that movie for me to go and play my first festival where I was exposed to bluegrass music down in Florida at the Spirit of Swanee Music Park. And it's weird to look back on a timeline and kind of string them together and find the little bits that connect. And that movie was one of the first for me.
Absolutely. Yeah, and for me, I also was really drawn I started out playing music in one regard where it was definitely more 60s and 70s heavy. And that included like Brownie McGee and Sonny Terry and Josh White and all these other performers. There was quite a variety of performers, of course, that were from that scene. But then later on, I decided to do a slam poetry for a long time. So I did a lot of performance poetry. And as I moved myself back into doing music, that's when I really got deep into the 20s and 30s music.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also drawn in by people like Tom Waits, for example. You know, Tom Waits started doing these really great acoustic albums, and one of them, Real Gone, was a really amazing album to me of having very rough and ragged banjos or snare drums or whatnot. And I always thought about all that grit and grime when I've tried to do my music as well. And yeah, I mean, at that time, it was still an early era for acoustic music, for just straight acoustic, let alone interpretations of old time acoustic music, you know. And let me think of another experience I guess I had early on that was very significant for me was when I got to meet Dave Van Ronk. I got to meet him when I was about 18 years old. I went to his concert and I got a chance to speak with him for about 10 minutes or so. But his show format of storytelling and song, that really took over my whole presentation style from what it was beforehand. So I also had a moment where I got to just meet him the one time, because he then passed away the next, I guess, 4 or 5 months after I saw him. He must have passed away. It was,
Yeah,
that back in 2001.
I covered him for the second episode, and I mean, everybody that I cover, I end up finding that they just had such wild lives, and his especially. I mean, he was a character. I mean, obviously the mayor of McDougal Street, like everybody says, but that came with a lot of reputation and character, both on stage and off stage. And yeah, I imagine that. You said you were 18 when you talked to him?
Yeah, I was 18 when I got to meet him at a concert at a place called Fiddler's Dream in Phoenix, Arizona.
I played there one time, a
Oh,
couple
you
times
played
actually.
Fiddler's Dream?
Yeah, of course.
Oh,
Yeah, such
so
a tiny little gem.
yeah. See, and so I got to see Van Ronk in this tiny little club, Fiddler's Dream, and see, because I used to go to all the Phoenix, Flagstaff, and Prescott folk festivals
Okay.
when I was first starting up. So a lot of the people around Fiddler's Dream are people that I knew. So I knew most all the performers that went through that club. And so when I saw that Van Ronk had played there, I actually had a 4-track recorder, a Tascam 4-track recorder, and I actually bootlegged the entire show. And I started to try to learn how he was doing all those songs,
Yeah.
and taking in the stories that he was telling, because he was really telling some amazing stories about Reverend Gary Davis and
Mm-hmm.
Bob Dylan, John Hurt, Willie the Lion Smith, just any number of beautiful performers that you can find within the lexicon of old time and American music. And so, like he had mentioned about seeing Willie the Lion Smith, I felt very blessed that I got a chance to see Van Ronk before he was gone. And
Yeah.
so that really put a fire under me. So when I had a chance to go to the Black Banjo Gathering in 2005, I had spent so much time reading every book by Sam Charters and Paul Oliver and all of the great blues scholars that I came in with a lot of knowledge that people had told me that they thought I was a very important voice to be within the scene, because I could speak of all these different things that, again, I could speak to people from 9 to 90 about blues.
Hmm.
and or country music or whatnot. And that was a beautiful skill. I always tell people it was a bunch of useless information that turned to useful information in the best type of way at one point.
Yeah, if anybody in the 60s and 70s scene, especially in Greenwich Village, I feel like Dave Unrock covered more ground than anybody. And yeah, learning about his his desire for, you know, to be a musicologist, to tell these stories, to keep alive history, and then to look back to all the early Newport Folk Festival pictures and see him literally sitting behind every single performer, you know, at every single performance. It just, it all, yeah, it all makes sense. And especially, yeah, his music and the way that he interpreted so many of those songs was such a, it was a very special and raw, you know, he had that raw emotional quality, no matter what song it was or what genre. And he could attach himself to that soul of the song very easily, which I really, really admired of him.
Yeah, absolutely. And so it was one of those things where after that was something that I got to do beforehand. But after I went out to North Carolina and the 10 years I worked with the Carolina Chocolate Drops, I got to meet everybody that I wanted to meet, from Leo Kottke to Odetta to, I mean, I got to know the Guthrie family through Sarah Lee Guthrie. And gosh, the name could keep on going, keep going and going, But I was always so pleased to have a chance to meet with the people that I admired and respected, and they could turn around and tell me that they just said, "Good job, keep it going." Whatever keep it going was for whatever it was meant for me to do, and that's been something that's been very amazing to one receive on one end, but then two to be able to convey it to other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's what tradition is all about, right? You know, getting
Absolutely.
inspired and then continuing to pass that inspiration on to somebody else.
Yeah, because especially once I started to spend time with some of the old time blues singers in North Carolina, I started to learn more about how they made their own personal styles based out of tradition,
Hmm.
and how over time, being exposed to a certain environment, you can pick up elements of a certain song. And I began to start working on my music in that way because it kind of allowed me to give my songs a time, a place, and a space, so that when they're presented to people, people can find you can reach into people's memory in a way that they may not have remembered, or they may not have been able to convey the music in their mind, but it's almost its own type of therapy that you can do for people. And so I've tried to be very conscious in my more recent years, as I continue to go on my journey, try to figure out the ways that I can continue to help people out, continue to help them expand emotionally or mentally or whatever it might be. But at the same time, of course, we're talking about all the ins and outs, but it's just fun songs to make us smile, though. That's
Right. That's
what
the
makes us laugh and
that's
cry,
the baseline, right?
Yeah,
Did you have any mentors?
oh, sure. I had a lot of mentors coming up. There were, of course, writing mentors. Like, when I was in college, the people I really respected the most was when I read about William Blake, and
Hmm.
also Geoffrey Chaucer and Shakespeare, Langston Hughes, James Weldon Johnson. I mean, those were a lot of people that I really respected. Nella Larson is another great author. When it came to leaving Arizona, of course, Sule Greg Wilson is someone who I always respect for having introduced the term Sankofa to me, which Sankofa is a wonderful West African proverb that means go back and fetch it. And I've used this proverb for all of my work. And Sule introduced me to that. It's actually on the back of my banjo here. This is a little Sankofa bird right here.
Oh wow,
And
that's
so
beautiful.
they're a symbolic message for rebirth and renewal. And so that's one part of it. And who else mentors? When I went to the gathering, I got to meet Mike Seeger, who was a big mentor to me for a long time. And I would visit Mike out at his house in Lexington, Virginia for many years. For bluesmen, I got John D. Holman, Boo Hanks, and uh, let's see, Aljamain Hinton is another one I got to spend time with as well. Yeah, just some beautiful players and beautiful people along the way, and then of course I've learned to pick a few as I've had a chance, and try to expand my knowledge of the type of finger picking that really drew me into the music. First time I got to hear good finger picking. Well, I'd probably say "You Are My Flower" by Flatt and Scruggs,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe "Don't Think Twice, It's All Right" by Bob Dylan, and that got me into Paul Clayton as well as Etta Baker's music.
Mm-hmm.
So I always think about them when it comes to finger picking. And then of course there's old John Hurt, who's another one that is a sort of mentor back in terms of record mentors. Um, I'm trying to think of who else there's been. Joe Thompson, he was another fellow that the gold time fiddler that helped form the Carolina Chocolate Drops, at least in our sound. He was a great player. Yeah, I mean the list can go on and on.
Again, that eclectic theme seems to be running through here.
Well, that's why the American Songster is the moniker I chose after so many years. I just found that the way that I was approaching most of my music was very multifaceted and multi-layered in a way that having singular schools of thought, it was just impossible for me to figure out how to describe what I was doing in my programs and in my shows. But as I began to study the history of the blues, I found the book Songsters and Saints by Paul Oliver, and that really took me on a trajectory that showed me that there was this type of singer, a songster, that came before the bluesmen,
Mm-hmm.
and they were a living human jukebox type, and they played all these different types of songs. And I just thought that that was such a beautiful term, songster,
Mm-hmm.
and it was an easy word too, so it wasn't very difficult to say it. And then the American, of course, I do songs from the United States for the most part, and so I have the American Songster, and that was a way for me to be able to describe a multifaceted approach to music with a word that wasn't going to be harder. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
could have tried, music physicianer or musicer, musicianer or that type of stuff, but
Right.
those are funky words.
Yeah, used on the plantations, I remember.
Mm-hmm.
Musicianer.
Yep.
Would you want to play something for us that kind of
Yeah.
stands in that American songster category?
Sure. Yeah. Let me. Well, I'll play this one that comes from my album Black Cowboys. Actually, no. I'll get this one. This one's called Steel Pony Blues. Here. This has a little bit of picking on it here. When you get down to Holbrook, you won't find me there. Good Lord, I caught the first thing smoking down the road somewhere. Caught the first thing smoking down the road somewhere. 'Cause I caught my steel pony and boys, I'm gonna ride. Getting far too old to follow this here herd. Good Lord, I caught the first thing smoking down the road somewhere. Caught the first thing smoking down the road somewhere. 'Cause I caught my steel pony and boys, I'm gonna ride. Go ahead and get it one time, six. Now they call me Mr. Flemons, 'cause I'm a pull porter now. Good Lord, I caught the first thing smoking down the road somewhere. Caught the first thing smoking down the road somewhere. 'Cause I caught my steel pony and boys, I'm going to ride. Go ahead and get down the trail. they call me Mr. Flemons, 'cause I done tore that guitar down. Good Lord, I caught the first thing smoking down the road somewhere. Now when you get over there, you won't find me, 'cause I caught my steel pony and boys, I'm gonna ride. Get it one more time.
Opa. I like some of those voicings you thrown up top there.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, there's a little bit of some Robert Wilkins, a little bit of this, that, and the other, you know. But yeah, that was a nice little number that came together for the Black Cowboys album.
Yeah, tell me about that.
Oh, sure thing. Well, you know, it was about, I first started thinking about this idea of Black Cowboys back in around 2010, 2011. And I was traveling home to Arizona from, I guess I was in North Carolina at that time. So I was driving in, and I stopped off at the Painted Desert gift shop, which is over by the Petrified Forest. Mm-hmm. And I found this book called The Negro Cowboys by Philip Durham. And it talked about how 1 in 4 cowboys that helped settle the West were African-American cowboys, working alongside the Anglo cowboys and the Mexican vaqueros. And so I just started researching everything I could find on Black cowboys. Now, I let this kind of go on for 10 years or so. I was just picked up books on Black cowboys, and whether they were kids' books or books on the history or adults or westward migration in the general aspect, because of course in the years from 1861 toward the beginning of the Civil War up until 1920, the idea of African American communities has shifted so many different types of ways, especially in the Reconstruction era. There were a lot of Black communities that no longer exist in the 20th century, and then even into the 21st century, we've even seen quite a demographic shift. But nevertheless, this idea of Black cowboys fitting within, I tried to keep it somewhere between the end of Civil War, 1865-ish area, to say 1920, and even a little before 1905, 1910. And I found this fascinating story of African American migration that spanned the first people who could get their own independent wages, all the way through religious groups that came out west. Like one called the Exodusters was a group that came out, and one of their young members later moved back to the South, and that fellow's name was George Washington Carver. And so he grew up out in the country out west, and then he moved back to the South. And so I just found 1,000 stories that were so beautiful about the West. And the story of Nat Love is one of the few stories of a Black cowboy who wrote his own autobiography. And to look at a picture of this guy in his cowboy gear is something really to behold. And so I wrote Steel Pony Blues as kind of a short meditation on that idea of catching a train and leaving the place you are to go somewhere else. I'd always hope that somewhere better, but it's constantly moving to a new location. And of course, that's something that fits within my own family's story. So it was sort of a transmogrification going within all of that. Or one person once told me how I describe my songs are like a reduction sauce. It's sort of a reduction sauce of an idea of Black cowboys, you know. But I had some other songs that were like that as well. I could
yeah, please do.
But like another one was the story of Bass Reeves here. This one's called He's a Lone Ranger. And another person who really inspired my researching on the album was Lightning Hopkins. And the wonderful Les Blank film that they called The Blues According to Lightning Hopkins, that was filmed back in the early 70s. Now there's a scene where Lightning's at an all-black rodeo in Houston. And I always kept that in my mind, that Lightning Hopkins was a black cowboy. And so I wrote a little song in his style. And this one is about a fellow named Bass Reeves, who was said to be the very first African American deputy sheriff he was the first deputy U.S. Marshal of the United States of America who was African American. And this is a little bit of his story here. Let me see how we do. This song is called "He's a Lone Ranger." Now he's a U.S. Marshal and a Lone Ranger. He is a U.S. Marshal and a Lone Ranger. He is a Lone Ranger. Bass Reeves is his name. There was a man way out west who ran this country with a star on his breast. Every white man and an Indian tribe. He was the baddest man they ever was alive. He's a U.S. Marshal and a Lone Ranger. He's a Lone Ranger. Bass Reeves is his name. Born a slave down in Arkansas, but with his master and his dear old mom. Mama said, son, you ain't free, but you do anything you want, though if the mister don't see. Now he's a U.S. Marshal and a Lone Ranger. He's a Lone Ranger. Bass Reeves is his name. Now Master caught Bass Reeves in a gambling game. Bass's freedom was the stake that he made. Now Master cheated. You ought to heard the sound of Bass's hoof beats as Master hit the ground. Now he's a U.S. Marshal and a Lone Ranger. He's a Lone Ranger. Bass Reeves is his name. You hear Bass Reeves break into song, getting down to business and it won't be long. Winning Muskogee, 100 miles around. They call Bass Reeves, he's bound to track you down, cause he's a U.S. Marshal and a Lone Ranger. He's a Lone Ranger. Bass Reeves is his name.
Hey, yo. Can definitely hear some Lightning Hopkins in there.
Oh yeah, you know, and I've always just loved that sound. And when I started doing that project, it just reading Bass Reeves' story just was it seemed like a Lightning Hopkins song in of itself, and it just made for the right combination, you know. Another one that was really that really caught me by surprise because I had learned the song many years before, not think of it as a cowboy number. This is one called Black Woman. And this is a piece that was recorded by Vera Ward Hall, who was a ballad singer, African-American ballad singer from Livingston, Alabama. And she was recorded by a lot of different people, John Lomax and Alan Lomax and Harold Portlander. And a lot of people know her song Another Man Done Gone, but this is a piece that I had learned. that is a nice little field holler.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to perform it. At first, I didn't really have much context for it, but when I began to do the Black Cowboys album and put it together, I realized that it made a great cowboy number. So here's a little bit of Black Woman. Well, come here, black woman. And sit on daddy's knee. Well, I've got something to tell you, pretty mama. Don't you holler, Lordy. Oh, well, I'm going back to Texas. To hear that wild ox moan. And if his moaning don't suit me, black woman, I'm gonna drive my bell cow home. Don't your kitchen feel lonesome? When your biscuit roll is gone. That's it.
Those falsettos are no joke.
Yeah, and what's amazing about them is for a song like that, it's about a minute and a half. But that was something I just loved about it. In a time where there's no limited structure, there's no limit to how long your song can be. Mm-hmm. I just always have found a great joy in hearing a song that is so short, but is so poignant.
Yeah, it's nice to not have to fit into a timeline and to be a little bit against the grain. Especially if so many field hollers were such emotive pieces. You're not meant to sing the same thing over and over again. It was meant to be an emotional piece of the time or of that day or of that, specific moment. And I feel like you definitely captured that with that.
Oh yeah. And that one's such it's such a neat style of music, because it's also, for the Black Cowboys, it was really nice to be able to show that, because I found that a lot of the songs are all about the work that men were doing. And it was really nice to imply that there was a woman in a home somewhere for these cowboys that are a part of the entire rest of the album, which was really something it really stylistically landed in a great spot as well.
Yeah, I agree. So we got Black History Month is coming up next month, and there's been so much African-American music that's been taken or suppressed by white artists and the music industry at large over the last 100 years. And it seems like the water has been muddied enough for people not to be aware enough of the true roots music of African-American music, the true roots behind it. And I was wondering if you might, in some, I guess, sumerical way, share some of the lesser known knowledge about African-American, could be Appalachian heritage or string bands or anything in that, so that people can get a little bit of a scope on where it stems from.
Oh, sure thing. Well, one thing I would always beg someone to take some time to refocus the lens and think more along social economic terms, more so than ethnic racial terms, and just know that there are worker bees and people that are the elite. And so when you start to change the focus of that lens, then the idea of Black music will begin to change and broaden and turn into a whole other epiphany in your mind. Like, one of the people that I always like to think about is a fellow named Leslie Riddle. Mm-hmm. Now, Leslie Riddle was from Kingsport, Tennessee, in that area, or in Kingsport, Bristol, Burnsville. All these different places are sort of an interesting corridor of Tennessee, North Carolina, and Virginia. And so Leslie was a good friends with a fellow by the name of Alvin Pleasant Carter, whose recording group, the Carter Family, were always looking for material to record for their records. And at one point, Leslie got to working with AP, and they started traveling around the country collecting songs with each other, and they were collecting songs for the Carter family to record. And so when you look at a picture of the Carter family, they seem like a completely white, pure white group. But to know that they are working with Leslie Riddle, and they are also recording some of the first popular records of songs from the African American gospel tradition, songs like Will the Circle Be Unbroken, or they record as Can the Circle Be Unbroken.
Mm-hmm.
Also songs like Hello Stranger, and other songs like Worried Man Blues. These are songs that are from African American tradition, but in the hands of the Carter family, they turn into what we visually see them to be. And that's one of the big asymmetrical parts, I think, of the story, is that people have been so conditioned to think along ethnic lines that there are some broader socio-economical lines in which we must now think of white and blackness, because these are the areas where there are the biggest discrepancies, is when people are taking advantage of the folks that don't know that they're being taken advantage, and they use that music against the people that made it. And so if we think of it on a broad scale like that, there have been many situations where you have African American mentors around some of the pioneers of country music specifically, but of course it goes both ways. You know, especially in the South, it goes both ways. People have found moments to connect and to play music together outside of normal hours, and that's something I've always thought about, and I always think about it even to this day, because it is something where, even though we have more social and racial tolerance than we've ever had in the United States than ever before, it is very multifaceted. And you know, it's a very fine line between good and you know, I guess how would I put it, completely, you know, unforgivable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's what music does, is it goes between those lines. That's what I've always been drawn into the old time music, is that you have people speaking in a language and a vernacular that is close to the root of the people's cause, whatever the people's cause may be.
Absolutely. Yeah, Leslie, especially, you know, he influenced Maybelle Carter's guitar style from a very early age, and he, you know, he was essentially the musical part of it, because AP couldn't. He only played fiddle. He could, you know, write down lyrics. He could essentially like retain melodies, but Leslie was the key part for Sarah and Maybelle to be able to take those songs and, you know, formulate their own versions. And I think it took until the 1960s for the CMAs to recognize Leslie Riddle
Yeah,
and
that
his
was
involvement with them.
Well, that was because of Mike Seeger, which was
Mm-hmm.
very interesting, because Mike was well, the New Lost City Ramblers were working with Maybelle Carter a lot during the 60s. And
Mm-hmm.
so Mike inquired about how she had learned how to play guitar, and he had actually made the first field recordings of Leslie Riddle in the 1960s. And what I find so interesting about listening to Leslie next to Maybelle is that Leslie's guitar playing is deeply in line with North Carolina Piedmont style picking.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a great picture of Leslie with Brownie McGee, who is another good friend of his. And when you hear Leslie, his style of playing is completely in line with what you hear with Brownie McGee or any of the Carolina pickers, which is something, there's something to be said about Maybelle and Leslie sounding different, because I would
Mm-hmm.
have assumed they might have sounded exactly the same. But it's interesting to see which parts Maybelle decided to use and which parts Leslie, you know, was able to give.
Sure.
And I think it's really interesting how it tells you a little bit about the development of sound, you know, because of course Maybelle's playing in a band and she has an auto harp next to her. So her guitar playing doesn't need to be quite as comprehensive as finger picking as you would have with Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a really amazing story of how AP and Leslie were able to collect these songs.
Yeah.
Leslie was able to take down that music and that melody. But then, of course, Leslie was he was like a lot of working class people at that time. They didn't think there was any money in music, so he
Mm-hmm.
never really put any time into it. So it was great when I'd asked Mike Seeger about this, and he said that Leslie really didn't think much of his own musical career until way after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
And Yeah, that's one of those amazing stories.
Yeah, that whole everything through that the Bristol explosion and everything that all the way up to the 60s folk revival, and yeah, just seeing again how those things string together is and how those artists play off each other. I agree and I've only heard one song of the Carter family where Maybelle is playing a Piedmont style,
Yeah.
and I don't remember what the title was, but yeah, the Carter scratch definitely has those elements, but it's not necessarily traceable to straight Piedmont. It has the same similar elements, but she obviously took it in a different direction.
Yeah.
And it could have been from her early banjo playing. It could have been from several other things, but yeah, I just find that fascinating. And I think you're right that he's a very poignant example of how that evolution didn't just come from, how white influences and how African-American influences meshed together from such an early age, but maybe that, obviously that didn't get the same recognition for a long time. So,
Well, one other thing I'll give you to think about, because I've been thinking a lot about this recently. The two first commercial recordings of the song John Henry are
mhm.
by Fiddlin' John Carson and Uncle Dave Macon.
Yeah.
And I think to myself sometimes, the one thing that John Henry is not is there's never been a white John Henry I can think of in any version of the song. And no matter who's singing it, it's always an understanding that he's a black man on the railroad. And I
Hmm.
think there's a certain amount of there's a certain amount of social tolerance that someone individually has if they're singing a song like John Henry. And it's very interesting the subtle cues and the subtle messages that can be sent down the line from the past. Then,
Hmm.
of course, on the other half of it, the African American groups like the Mississippi Sheiks or Jim and Andrew Baxter, and there are a lot of the artists that were in the Race Records catalog that haven't it really hasn't been brought together in a comprehensive way because it's been so um, just marginalized for so many years. I think sometimes on purpose. Other times, I think it's just the categorization that we naturally have used in the 20th century, which means we have a great opportunity. Now we have a great new opportunity to showcase this in a proper way,
Yeah,
in,
I agree.
yeah, in a comprehensive way.
Yeah, I wonder if I'm sure you're familiar with Dust to Digital, and
Oh yeah, yeah, the Ledbetters. I helped contribute to that B-sides
yeah,
album of the Harry Smith anthology. Great people.
really great people. And yeah, I wonder if they would be in line with something like that. I mean, they're doing so much work as it is, to unearth so much stuff, but I feel like that specific thing might be something that they might attach themselves to very quickly if they had the
Yeah,
time.
I'll have to keep on chatting with Lance. We've wanted to do something together for a long time, but we'll just have to I'll have to keep on I'll have to keep tugging his sleeve and see what we can do.
Yeah, and let me know, of course. I would love to help in any way possible.
Of course, of course.
Um, So your Grand Ole Opry debut was back in 2018. Seems like every single episode of this show, I end up mentioning the Grand Ole Opry, and I just have to ask how that was under the new lights, today's modern lights, and if it felt at all like it seems like it would feel.
Oh, it's as amazing as it feels, as it sounds, as it looks. I first started to play on the Opry in 2008 with the Carolina Chocolate Drops, but when I made
Mhm.
my debut a couple years ago, it was just such a beautiful moment because it was I started out with doing a harmonica solo, and I did a little banjo number, and then I did a guitar number just to show those three different instruments in a row, and the crowd was just so kind. And then I
Mhm.
was just there about, I guess, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and they had me in the Roy Acuff room in the number one dressing room. So
Mhm.
when I started playing out there 12 years ago, I was able to through a connection. I was able to make my way into that Rory Cuff dressing room in the number one seat. And 12 years down the road, I was able to make it as a soloist. So it felt really good to be up there on that stage. And it's very, very beautiful. It's set up in a very beautiful way. It's because it's the Mother Church of Country Music. They give you a
Mhm.
little chance to get onto the into the backstage, get on the little pew that's almost like its own little mourner's bench, and it was really wonderful to be able to just relive some of those moments, because they have memorabilia ready all over the backstage in this way. Hank Williams suits, Minnie Pearl's hat, Patsy Cline's clothes, and it's just, and also you have like, there's like, Garth Brooks's hat, or even Luke Combs's like, baseball cap, a little bit of everything with country, which makes it so special.
Yeah.
And then of course getting on that stage, there's not a better stage than WSM stage. So I've also just enjoy the reverence of that alone.
Yeah. A lot of history. A lot of history.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that they had memorabilia backstage. That makes it even better.
Oh yeah, when it's not pandemic time, you can usually do these beautiful backstage tours, and it's pretty awesome. I ain't gonna lie, it's one of the best feelings.
I didn't know that you were there with the Carolina Chocolate Drops. I also wanted to ask, obviously you guys met at the Black Banjo Gathering. Do you think it would have happened, or, I mean, obviously that gathering had to be such a pinnacle moment in your life, and possibly for Rhiannon and hubby and the other folks too. Do you think you all would be doing what you're doing if it hadn't been for that gathering?
Yeah, I don't think we would have. I really feel for myself, I really wouldn't have gone to North Carolina, I don't think, if I hadn't gone to the gathering itself. And it happened to be a moment where I had finished out college and I really didn't have anything holding me back, so I just went whole hog into it. I'm not sure. I think maybe Rhiannon might have been doing it, but Justin, he probably wouldn't have been doing it full time.
Mm-hmm.
Just how the original trio went.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else, I feel like they wanted to do what they could, and we did what we could in the group as we did. And well, it was about 9 years we were able to do the group all together.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think Rena and I were the only two that were really so driven to do a full time musician's life that it's basically how it would have gone, I think, in the end.
Yeah. So this podcast, it aims to bridge the gap for folks. There's two facets. There's the tickling the fancy of the folks that actually love music history, and then there's bridging the gap for folks who potentially wouldn't, or maybe on the fence, or maybe can be enticed to come over to the other side and learn about the history of music. But I'm wondering if you can find in your mind one musician who can be a gateway to link somebody to the past, and it can be to old time music, to blues, to early country or hillbilly music. If there's somebody you can think of who's listening, or people that are listening, somebody that you can think of that could tie them directly back there, and maybe it could be somebody that's it's not such a harsh, transition, if that makes sense.
Sure. I mean, for me, it's always hands down Henry Ragtime Texas Thomas. He's of all of the performers, I feel like he has the most accessible sound. If it wasn't him, I would say probably Mississippi John Hurt, and particularly the album Mississippi John Hurt Today, the first Vanguard album. Because that, I feel like, those are probably the two most accessible albums, I think, for people that don't know anything about the music. I probably pick one of those two. And Henry Thomas, Texas Worried Blues, with that fishing blues right at the top.
Mm-hmm.
I think that can help anybody get through it. Because with Henry Thomas, it might take a little bit to get over some of the sounds of the scratchiness and whatnot. But I feel that the song material that Henry Thomas presents in those 23 tracks, they are just... It entices the ear enough to get you past those flaws of the audio recording, I feel. And then the Mississippi John Hurt Today doesn't have any of the audio quality faults, but it has some of the most powerful Mississippi John Hurt material, I feel, from front to back. I just think that's his best record.
I agree. Well, if anybody's listening to the show, that I use Payday as intro song, and he was in my second episode, and I probably mention him every other episode, but I have not mentioned Henry Ragtime Thomas. So I think that will be something that hopefully people will go and search themselves. All right, that's kind of a fun little game. If you had to pick a time period of 10 to 20 years of music culture as your favorite or most influenced by, what would it be?
You said 5 to 10?
We could say between 5 and 20, or 10 and 20.
Ooh, 10 and 20. Well, if I was going to do 20, I might as well. Well, if I just went from 27 and added 20, that's 47. That's pretty good. 27 to 47, I could.
27 47.
Yeah, that I think that could work out pretty well. If it was 20 to, yeah, whew, that's a tough one. That's a tough one.
Why would you say
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I think 27 to 47, I think we'd get some good stuff.
Why would you say that?
Well, there were a lot of it would miss some of my favorite post-war music from that time because I'm a big fan of rock and roll, 50s rock and roll. But there was something between 1927 and 35. They just recorded a lot of my favorite type of country blues music,
Mm-hmm.
and so I just really enjoyed that era of music. Uh, Going all the way into the late 30s, 40s, and into the early to late 40s, that's some of my favorite jazz
Mm.
because that's leading into bebop and into some of the more interesting small ensemble jazz, as well as some of the big moments in jazz history. And because the 30s and the 30s going into the early 40s, you have a lot of really great recordings from Louis Armstrong and everybody from Jack Teagarden to Kid Ory to whoever you want to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, also a lot of the Dixieland revival period as well is steeped in the early 40s. So that's also a big era for me as well for New Orleans jazz. And yeah, that's a good era, I'd say. I miss Ray Charles though.
Mm-hmm.
I miss Ma Rainey from 27 to 40, 47. That's what kind of is killing me. But yeah,
You're probably gonna have to, shake something off one way or the other on that side of the coin.
yeah, Gus Cannon to Meade Lux Lewis. That's what I'm gonna go for with that one.
So would you want to play a tune? Either you could pick something from that time period if you want, or maybe a song that has historical significance.
Well, yeah. Well, let me get a little bit of this banjo here. I'll do some
Yeah,
John Henry since I was talking about him earlier.
please do.
Let's get a couple of rounds and syncopate a few of them.
Hey yo. What year is that banjo?
This banjo was made for me about 2 years ago. This is a fairly new one here. This was made by Bob Thornburg, who I got to meet through Mike Seeger as well. And yeah, he asked if he asked me if I wanted a banjo to be, and he sent this beautiful one down with I kind of showed you before the little family tree with the Sankofa birds.
Mm-hmm.
Did a black palm on the fretboard,
Mm-hmm.
and then we got this little beautiful headstock
Yeah,
that we had made
gorgeous.
out. Yeah, and so this one's a little family heirloom one. I just love the way this thing sounds. It's always good to syncopate a little on that, and also to be able to play five-string banjo. And we think of the banjo as a high-strung instrument, as a sound that's a little tinnier.
Mm-hmm.
But the gourd banjo, with its nylon gut strings here that we've got, it gives a real mellow tone, which is really something. And especially when you think of early African American banjo players and Caribbean banjo and African banjo, it almost It almost gives a whole different sense, almost like slap bass is the only thing that I can think of that really gets into that same tonality. But
Hmm.
it's that's something that's really beautiful about the gourd banjo.
Extremely warm. I can say that.
Hmm.
Do you have other ones that are older than that?
No, well, I have an accounting in the house, but that's one that's kind of blown out. It's not really an instrument that can play.
Yeah.
Other instrument I have around, just looking over here in the corner, I got my good friend Big Head Joe, which he's resting at the moment. I can't take him out at this point. Big Head Joe's the giant 6 string banjo,
Hmm.
and so he's one that if you have the listeners look me up at some point, you can find me with Big Head Joe. I have a couple of portraits with him, but he's a very big banjo, 18-inch head banjo. That's a 6 string tuned like a guitar, and it's very much in the style of like Papa Charlie Jackson.
Did you play that in your David Holt interview for State of Music?
Yes, I did. Yes, I
Yeah,
did. Yeah, if you look up that State of Music, we talk about Big Head Joe and his
that's
historical
right.
lineage.
I got a good kick out of that. So I got a couple more things for you, and I really appreciate your time. So who's an artist today that is keeping true to American roots music? And it could be, again, any kind of the spectrum in the songster category that people might not have heard of, that you can think of. Somebody that you feel like is keeping those traditions alive, or perhaps playing on them.
Well, someone I hate to seem like I'm self-serving on this one, but I recently was involved with a wonderful album project with an artist named Tyler Childers,
Mm-hmm.
and I did an album called Long Violent History with him. Now, Tyler is a major label country music artist, and he was up until the pandemic, he's been touring with Sturgill Simpson, and he's a really great songwriter. I'd known about him beforehand. I'd actually really liked his album. I'm All Yourn is the name of the song. Really nice, kind of rootsy, gutsy country music.
Mm-hmm.
And he tours with another friend of mine named Jesse Wells, who's a well-known Kentucky traditional fiddler and guitar player. He plays everything with strings. And so I got a call from Jesse, and he asked me to come down and play some backup on Tyler's album, Long Violent History. And what surprised me was that instead of doing material more in line with what I had heard before, Tyler had decided to do a Kentucky fiddle record.
Mm-hmm.
So he cut a whole EP where he is playing fiddle, and he only has one song that he's singing at all. And so it was very much an avant-garde departure because he's really known for his voice.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, he did some really great old time Kentucky numbers, and not particularly easy ones either. Some very interesting crooked numbers. And so the whole album is just this beautiful, I don't know, 28 minutes, I guess, 33 minutes, and just beautiful renditions. And we have a very nice all-star band that when I got there, I was surprised to find there was members of Mandolin Orange as
Mm-hmm.
well as myself, Jesse, and then Tyler. We were all just playing some really beautiful old-timey music and very traditional sounding. Um, it was one of the first times I'd really gotten to hear a group that was able to mimic the sounds of the Kentucky String Ticklers and some of the big ensemble groups that recorded in the early 1920s. And so that felt really good to be a part of the entire package there. And so I came in and put my flavor on it. But that was probably the most interesting thing, because especially because he has such a great voice, and the fact that he used it for not a lot of this project, 98% of it is not no vocals. It was really a very avant-garde move.
It's an incredible album. I covered his story, his life story, in episode 6,
Oh,
and at the end mentioned the entire process of Long Violent History, and I mean going all the way into the dialogue that he put out as his press release, you could say, and then into the tastefulness, and I mean honestly, because he comes from Muhlenberg County and there's so much history there. I really respected him before because he holds true to an original country sound that you don't hear a lot these days,
yeah.
and has spoken out about that as well, and has probably changed a lot of people's minds about what real country music is.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that he did the same thing with that record, and the amount of people that were exposed to fiddle and old time music you know, there's probably some folks that prefer to hear him sing, but I'm sure there's many people that that saw that as a respectful move to bring back exactly what this podcast is about, exactly what you're about, of preserving those songs in that old style. And it really, yeah, the quality and the way that it came together, and you almost hear it in a circle, as if everybody's sitting in a circle and playing around one mic. That's how it, in my mind, when I was listening to it, that's what it brought me to. I could just close my eyes and it was like I was at a fiddle jam, you know, but it was like a organized fiddle jam where it wasn't so, you know, play on words and people aren't kind of just making up what they want, but it was just really tasteful.
Oh yeah, it was a special experience. Even for me, it was, you know, one of the things that was funny is that they recorded some of the first track in a big sinkhole that had actually grown in Tyler's front yard. And so when I got there, they asked me not to use my car to drive in because we had to go on the back cattle trail. And so there was a little bit of a Lomaxian sort of field recording quality to the session of itself just by how we were able to get there, because it was a 40 minutes from the actual road and to get to that back door to do the recording. And so it was really fun to have an adventure being on the old twisty mountain roads in Kentucky, which I had been doing 12 years before by myself.
Mm-hmm.
It was a beautiful way for me to regain something that I thought maybe I had lost, or also in all this technology thought maybe I never would do again, because you know the GPS let us down that time, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely conjures up an image of Alan Lomax pulling some big Presto machine from his car to somebody, you know, in the middle, you know, 40 miles off the interstate, the old interstate in Kentucky. And that definitely conjured up the same image.
Yeah, but you know, and it gave me a lot of inspiration. Again, thinking of this album, it was really amazing to see, one, that he wanted to do it, but two, that he actually got the label support to get the album out. And I hope that it's just I hope that that can be a continuing trend in the industry, just to see and hear more traditional type music. Because I feel like now there are less hangups about tradition and authenticity and all these sort of things as being a strict guideline.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd hope to see more. I hope to just see more old time music unabashedly coming out there and unabashedly being accepted as well.
Yeah, that's probably a testament to the way that music is perceived these days, or is captured, the way that people take it in. Because, you know, if you see a notification on your Spotify that there's a new release, you're just going to click it. You're not going to hear a press release about it. You're not going to be told what it is before it happens. So yeah, it could be that record labels are maybe coming around to the idea that they don't have to be so strict on those, you know, these are your margins. You stay within those, which would be, you're right. It would be a really nice trend to see continue.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So you've worked with, this is just another geeking out thing. You've worked with Ken Burns. I got to ask, is he as likable as he seems? Do you have any stories about your experience with him?
Oh, well, you know, with Ken Burns, I got a chance to do a little program over at the American History Museum in Washington, D.C., with the Bright Angels Foundation that Ken Burns runs. And it was right as the country music documentary was sort of winding itself into a frenzy. And so I was called in on this gig, and I went and played and did an intro with him. Ken Burns walked up to me and he said, "Dom," and I said, "Ken, it is so good to meet you." And he said, "Dom, I've been watching your face the top and end of every evening. Thank you for everything you do." And then we got our nice little photo op, and that was a beautiful time. You know, like I said, that's the list of names along those lines can be endless. But Ken Burns, what a powerful fellow, and you know,
Man.
and always making great work.
Mm-hmm. He's done so much to expose people to true culture. And it was just really, yeah, he's on the top of my absolute list, as I'm sure he was yours to meet one day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a couple more things. What do you have going on? Anything that you're up to lately that you want to talk about? You can shamelessly plug anything you want.
Well, I guess the things that I've got going on, of course, are the reissue of Prospect Hill, my album from 2014, and kind of all the different variants that make that whole song cycle is one. That's one thing. I have, what else do I've got? I got the Black Cowboys album around. I've also got Proto Billy, which is an album I did along with Hank Sapoznik and Dick Spotswood on JSP Records. Now, Proto Billy it's Proto-Billy, the Tin Pan Alley and minstrel DNA of country music. And so what this collection does is it takes songs that were recorded in the wax cylinder era, mostly songs on sheet music from the 1890s, and it shows a recording from the 1890s next to a song from the 1920s. So, for example, the first song is Casey Jones, and we have a beautiful version from Billy Murray, followed by an old-timey version from Fiddlin' John Carson, followed by a barrelhouse piano version by a fellow named Jesse James. And so showing sort of the evolution of any given song from the 1890s. So it's a nice 3 CD set. I actually just also had a book sent to me called The True West from Mifflin Howe, who's a guy I've gotten to work with for a little bit, and he was inspired by my Black Cowboys album to make a diverse Western book. So The True West is the name of that one. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Oh, this is my single I did with Rev Payton. We have a remake we did with Shake Your Money Maker, Elmore James's classic, but I have Reverend Payton's Big Damn Band, and I'm singing a good deal of the song. And then we also have Steve Cropper from Booker T and the MGs joining us on that one. So it's a real guitar-heavy single. But you can find all that on my artist page or theamericansongster.com. And yeah, I guess that's everything right off the top.
I'll link those things in the description. I've listened to the song and it's fantastic. I played before Reverend Payton's Big Damn Band at a festival in Ohio a couple years ago, and it was the first time I'd heard of them and the first time I'd seen them, obviously. And they're a powerhouse, absolute powerhouse. So much fun on stage to watch. So much, from the side stage or from the audience, they're just really a pleasure to watch.
Oh yeah, they're good old friends of mine. We met years and years back at a festival, and we've just kept them in touch. And it was nice that we were able to get this one single together because we had been really wanted to try to do something. You just have those friends that you say we got to try to get together to record one song at one point. So yeah. I was glad that we were able to get that going.
Absolutely, especially with what's going on now. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Last question. Do you have a message that you want to send out regarding all the deep changes going on in the world? And it doesn't need to tie into music, just anything you want to send out there.
Well, I would recommend to everybody, be mindful of who you are, your identity, and the things that you say, and what you mean when you say the things you're saying to others. And that's really all you can do, because these are very interesting times. Don't let just the visuals fool you. And try your best just to be the best in your heart that you can be, because love is going to be the answer overall here. That's all you can say.
I love that. Thank you so much, Dom. I really appreciate your time today. So much information. I feel like we could talk for days and days about this stuff. And I would love to chat with you more. And I just really appreciate you taking some time today.
No problem. Hey, Nick, it's all right. It's all right with me, man. Keep being the best songcatcher you can be, man. And we'll get together again soon.
Yeah, it sounds great. Okay. Cool. That was great. Question for you.
Yeah.
I know I've already asked a lot of you today.